Hello, it's Crane here with the long overdue patch 1.06 numbers. Wait a minute, long overdue? Isn't it only September 7th today? Looks like I'm a day early. Okay, I'm kidding. The patch note was released on August 9th. I think most of us can agree that patch 1.06 was a great patch for Elden Ring, with new stuff like cross-region invasions, otherwise known as Wex Dust from Dark Souls 3. But alas, you're not here for the small talk, but for the numbers, including many unlisted changes you probably didn't even know about. Starting with the balance changes, great swords, curved great swords, and great hammers were buffed, and so were great axes. Above the red dividing line are all buffs for the weapon types listed. There are even more buffs that are unlisted. Firstly, let's cover the basics quickly. The heavy attack and charged heavy attack of the weapons have varying changes. For example, the Moonlight Greatsword's heavy attack is 7 frames faster than 30 FPS. Rather than covering them one by one, since each number has to be dug through, my best suggestion is to retry the weapons themselves and feel whether or not the heavy attacks are worth it, rather than getting stuck in the mindset that, wow, they're so much faster. Yeah, sure, they're faster, but they were way too slow before anyway, so don't bother comparing and just try out the new heavy attacks. Next, they are super vague on the great axe changes. For example, the butchering knife also got a buff to the startup of charged heavy attack, but not the regular heavy attack. And in general, everything got a slight boost to recovery speed as listed. Again, get a feel by using them, which I believe is much more useful than telling you guys that the recovery frames are sped up by around 2 frames and 30 FPS. So what exactly can I tell you? Well, the guard counter speed of the listed weapons got faster. As you can see here, the Great Axe didn't get a boost to guard counter speed, but all the other weapons are now 2 frames faster at guard countering. Furthermore, there is an unlisted change. Colossal weapons are also 2 frames faster at countering and 30 FPS, placing them at the same speed as the other heavy weapon guard counters. Makes no sense to me whatsoever, but it is what it is. If Colossal Swords can do poke attacks at 14 frames, I don't see why Colossal weapons can't guard counter as fast as lighter weapons. Also, another unlisted change is Great Hammers, which got a 2 frame faster recovery on the guard counter. This only applies to Great Hammers. Next, Cypher Pata's buff makes its weapon art longer. The more interesting change is the change to Glintstone Pebble and Glintstone Dart. Originally, Glintstone Pebble was certainly OP, so the nerf was well deserved. These are the changes. As for Glintstone Dart, the Ash of War is quite crap for PvP, but it's still usable in PvE. The poise damage is written in PvP terms, by the way. In PvE, you would need to divide them by 10. Now, you're going to ask me, Crite, but my Glintstone Dart used to be able to stagger in PvE, even with 0 poise damage. Did you get something wrong? Well, that is because of something called damage level, that determines how long the stun is, and it can apply to PvE enemies, even if you don't poise break them. These are the frames of stun in 30 FPS. As you can see, I would say, Glintstone Dart's PvE capabilities actually got nerfed, since the stun on PvE enemies that can be stunned got lowered. That 30 poise damage is really negligible most of the time. As for Glintstone Pebble Ash of War, it became twice as long, but its damage got lowered and its poise damage is also gutted. Furthermore, as the final nail on the coffin, even if you poise count perfectly and stagger your enemy with the Ash of War projectile, the hit stun is 25 frames shorter, meaning that your enemy will still be able to roll out of your follow-up attack. So, this Ash of War turned into more of a long-distance poke, and not a one-hit win button. Next, the most significant change of the patch, the light roll, quick step, and bloodhound step changes. These are the changes in terms of iframe and distance. One thing to note is the recovery frame also got longer for moves like BHS. Since recovery frames have varying frames depending on the next action you do, I didn't list them out specifically. If you want the resources, they're in my Discord in the description down below. But I'll give an example. BHS into BHS used to give 20 iframes, followed by 2 recovery frames. Right now, BHS is 16 iframes, followed by 7 recovery frames into the next BHS. Furthermore, the next BHS only has 14 iframes, because repeated usage of either BHS or Quickstep reduces their iframes by 2 and adds the missing iframes to recovery frames. Another thing to note is, light rolls don't have more iframes than medium rolls. They simply have a longer dodge distance. Quickstep's tracking also got a change, so you can actually circle around someone's back with Quickstep now for a backstab. I will make a video diving deeper into roll comparisons and whether or not light roll is actually worth it, because it is very dependent. Light rolls aren't automatically better for builds, as their cost is quite high. This is a change that was definitely needed, as there was no point going for light equip load. And I also disagree with people who automatically call light roll OP, just because it is one answer to get out of getting roll caught. Okay, coming up next are two big nerfs to a very popular Ash of War and spell. Let's get the Stars of Ruin change out of the way. The tracking is greatly reduced, so if you're standing a bit further away, you can even strafe this spell without dodging. My suggestion is to just run Star Shower now. Rivers of Blood got a huge nerf, and a fundamental change. Originally, the Blade Aura and Blade were considered one single entity. If you get hit by either, you took the same amount of damage and bleed. Now, they're considered two different entities, dealing damage depending on which part hits you. In general, both parts got a 10% reduction in damage, and the Blade Aura got quite the hefty nerf on bleed buildup. There are 3 parts of Corpse Prowler, with the first part being 2 slices, the second part being 3 slices, and the third part being a single slice. Their poise damage changes are listed accordingly. As for the status changes, they were calculated according to total bleed buildup, because each part is slightly off perfect numbers, so it is easier to just give the numbers an overall reduction. In short, yeah, it was quite the heavy nerf. Next, we move on to stuff like Lucerne changes, which, sorry to break it to you guys, is only a very slight buff for Lucerne, and this weapon remains a weak halberd. If you want the puny amount of shield pierce on a few specific attacks, you might as well be using the Vulgar Militia Shato, which has a 40% shield pierce on all attacks including Ash of War. But looking at this list, you probably noticed something weird. Yes, because the Knight Rider and Golden Halberd share the same animation as the Lucerne, they accidentally got buffed with the same shield pierce too, making the already niche Lucerne even more useless. This Lucerne change is basically a shadow buff to Knight Rider Glaive and Golden Halberd. Okay, up next. They fixed a bug which made it harder for two-handed jump attack with Bloodhound Fang to break enemy stance. This is basically a change to stamina damage dealt, which indeed looked like a bug because other curved swords deal 258 stamina damage too. Then, this list is followed up by a lot of other bug fixes which are mostly irrelevant. The more notable ones are the HP regeneration bug from equip swapping and Opaline Heart tier, only applying to the elemental damage side of things instead of the physical side too. Now that it actually applies to the physical side, this is actually a pretty good crystal tier. Other than that, many moves that are standard damage are changed to slash damage, which really isn't that big of a deal, but a change nonetheless. Yeah, that's about it. I think I covered the important things. As I said, I'll be covering light rolls and related dodge changes separately. Like and subscribe so you don't miss it, and buy my book to support the channel and request a topic. Krite, signing out.